was over here last night. I come over and I opened up my Bible, and the next thing I fell asleep at my desk, and my wife called me and woke me up. And Christian came in and was sitting there talking with me, and he said, "Dad, is there anything I can do for you?" I said, "Yeah, you can preach in the morning if you want." So he's going to do it. I am blessed. The Lord has done great things in my home and in my family with my sons. And I love all three of them, and we know that God is still working in their lives. And Christian is doing such a great job with the young people, the teens. And I know that, they love him. And he had a great group here Wednesday night, and he was too sick to come over and be part of that. But he has been a great blessing to me. And he said, well, when I told him that, he said, well, Dad, I wish that I was ready to speak. And then he said, well, give me a few minutes. And so he went back there, and at midnight, he finally came home. And so I believe that he's going to be a blessing to you this morning. This is the year, isn't it? That we're looking for God to perfect the vision that he has in our life. And I believe he's got a lot more for my sons. And we're going to see God do those things. So just, believe with him. And, I believe that God is going to give him a word this morning. And 6 o'clock tonight, we'll be back to normal. But just let God just begin to, speak to you this morning and give us something good today.
Praise God. How's everybody doing this morning? Yesterday was such a weird day for me. It was strange. All week long I felt being led by the Spirit for something. I didn't know what it was, but, I was seeking God, and I really had no idea what he was trying to show me and tell me, but I knew that it was something important. So I just, I sought after him, and I searched for his voice all week long, and I thought, God, I don't know what this is, but I know it's something. And last night, God just spoke to me and said, go to the church and pray. Go to the church and pray. I had no idea why, had no idea what he was trying to get through to me, but he just told me to go pray. And I did, right away. No questions asked. I went over and I just started praying. And I went into my dad's office, and I know that I'm telling you what, this sickness is knock out, drag out kind of thing. It is bad. Like it took me out from Tuesday to Thursday, really. I had to call into work, and I never do that. And, in ministry, you can't really call in. It's not like that. You got to be there regardless of the circumstances. You got to be there. And my dad covered for me on Wednesday, and I went in his office, and I seen him, and he had all his books sprawled out and his Bibles and his sticky notes, and he had his head down at the desk. And I just knew that he wasn't in any shape to do it. And I looked at him, and I was like, look, if there's anything I can help you to do, just let me know. And, he hit me with, you can preach tomorrow. And I was like, man, God, I'm not prepared to do this, I'm not ready to do this. I haven't, with my method to get a sermon, it's usually I'm studying from Wednesday to Wednesday for youth. I take it serious. I get in there, and I am like just full force constantly every single day. I wake up, and that's the first thing I do is I get into my word. Wednesday to Wednesday, I am studying for my sermon for that week. And this week, I wasn't able to do that because I was knocked out with a sickness for so long. But I went into my office and I just started praying, and I was like, God, I'm not ready to do this. I can't do it in my own. And God reminded me that it's not about us. And it's not us. It's not our power. It's not our fleshly being that can accomplish these things. And part of being in ministry is being ready to be called upon whenever it is. And you don't have to be standing up here with a mic and a Bible to be in the ministry and to be ministering the word. It can be in the grocery store. It can be at your job. It can be at school. For you teenagers, I tell you that all the time. wherever you are called upon. God will put you in that circumstance. He will put you in that situation, and he will reveal to you a scenario where you can make a difference. And that's what it's all about. But if you would, just turn with me into Numbers chapter 13 today. I love this portion of the Bible. It's Old Testament, and it's crazy, and it's wild, and people are a little bit less reined in as they are in the New Testament. You know, it's a different landscape at that time. Chapter 13, it tells us here, you know, where they're talking about how God commands Moses to send out the spies into the land of Canaan to, you know, eye out the land and get an idea of what they're going to be coming into, the promised land that he's going to give them. You know, in chapter 13, it says right here in verse 27, it says, "And they told him and said, We came unto the land whither thou sent us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in that land, and the cities are walled and are very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. And the Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said, We will not be able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought back an evil report of the land, which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up of the inhabitants thereof. And the people that we are in it are great men of great stature. It says, And we saw there giants, the son of Anak, which come as giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. See, the children of Israel are facing a very serious dilemma here. You know, the spies have been sent out by Moses to get an idea of the challenges and, you know, the things that lie ahead of the land that's been promised to them. And, you know, he wants them to go out and get a report of not only what they have to face, but the things that are there for their taking. Moses tells them to bring back a positive report. He says, bring back a positive report. He doesn't tell them, tell me what we're going to be facing when we go in there. You know, tell me what kind of giants we're going to be facing. He tells me, bring back a positive report. I want to know what God is bringing us into. That's what he's fixated on. You know, and they go, and the Bible says that they brought back a grapevine that was so large that it took 2 men to carry it. And, you know, this should be a great moment for them. You know, it's been confirmed that the land is vast with good landscape. The fruit that they bring back is so big, it takes 2 men to carry it, and that blows me away, because if you see a grapevine, a normal representation of a grapevine, it's tiny. This is huge. This takes 2 guys to carry it. In Numbers chapter 14, it continues on. It says, And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. And the whole congregation said unto them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God that we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore hath the Lord brought us into this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return unto Egypt? You know, as soon as the Israelites hear the initial bad report, the wheels immediately start falling off. And that's all it took. The first initial bad report. They didn't hear anything else that anyone else had to say. 10 out of the 12 brought back a bad report. The wheels start falling off. They start blaming God. You know, they start blaming Moses and Aaron. I'm sure they started blaming each other. You know, I'm sure they started blaming the wife and the husband. How could you make me come out here? I had a great mud hut back in Egypt. You know, how could you convince me to do this? I'm sure they started blaming the kids, anybody that was in their area and in their general vicinity. How many times have you seen people who just get upset about something, they lash out at the nearest person around them? Something starts going wrong, and they just instantly, anybody who's around them is the first person who gets the double dose of it. Not looking at my mom, by the way. Numbers chapter 14, verse 4. I love this. It says, And they said to another, Let us make a captain, let us return to Egypt. And it blows me away. They're so overtaken by one set of bad news that they are ready to return to the bondage and the captivity that God had freed them from. See, we as humans, we like a sure thing. We like a routine, and we don't like anybody messing with it normally. We like things in an order. I like structure. I'm structured in my life. Everything I do is structured, and I like my routine, and I like my day-to-day, thing that I get up with a bottle of water every morning, and I sit down with my Bible before I go to work. I try to get an hour in every morning before I go. If I don't get my full hour in, I pick it up as soon as I get back home. It's my thing. It keeps me going, and it gets my day started on a good note. It gets my day started on a note where the first piece of word that I see is positivity. And it's a godly inspiration. It helps me. Structure works for me very well. I get up with my water. I know a lot of you guys do coffee. I've tried, and I can't do it. I can't do coffee. And you know why I know I can't do coffee is because both Carols here, Carol Smith and Carol Russo, make the best pot of coffee like ever, from what I've been told. I've tried it, and it all tastes like dirt to me. I can't get over it. So it's hopeless. If I can't take theirs and I don't like theirs, I know it's just going to be impossible for me to get onto it. I've tried. I can't do it. But I like structure. I like that. That's how I work. That's how I do my daily routine. The bad thing about having this mentality is if we're not careful, we can easily fall into the negative kind of structure, into the wrong kind of structure, into the structure that brings us down, the structure that destroys us. I've seen people over and over in my life stay in abusive relationships, verbally and physically, because they got used to it. They became okay with it. They became acceptant of it. It was structure to them. As bad as they hated it and as bad as they wanted to get out, at the end of the day, that person was always there, and they couldn't stand the thought of being alone. So they constantly went back to it. I've seen people fall into addiction this way, whether it be drugs or sex or gambling. I've seen them all a negative, product of negative structure in their life, something that, they always went back to, something that seemed familiar to them. And that's what the Israelites are facing right now at this moment. They're in a new environment, and they're surrounded with new things, and they've just received word that it isn't going to be as easy as they hoped it would be. Because God was making it easy on them. He put them through the Red Sea. He destroyed Pharaoh and his army. He's making it easy. He's putting them right there where they need to be. And they've gotten used to this, this kind of thing. God is making it easy. And that's how it's supposed to be. But they get there, and it isn't as easy as they want it to be. So they immediately want to go back to that negative environment because they know it. They're used to it. As bad as it is, they've come to accept that lifestyle, the captivity and the bondage. They're okay with it. Not that they like it, but they're okay with it. They've come to know it. They become accustomed to the negative structure, and they are gripped with a fear of the unknown. A fear of the unknown, of a place, a strange place that they're at. A strange, new city. And it's also overwhelming to them. In Numbers chapter 14, verse 5 through 9, it says, Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh were with them that searched the land, rent their clothes. And they spake unto the company of the children of Israel, saying, The land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. And if the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land, and he give it to us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebelled not ye against the Lord, neither feared ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. See, now Joshua and Caleb, they show up and said, look, we were there too. We seen this area. We seen this land. They are bread for us. I love that line. I love that part. Joshua and Caleb, they were bold. They were ready to go. They wanted this thing done. They had faith in God that he was going to get them through and get them to their end goal. They seen the size of them. They seen the exact same city, but it didn't matter to them. Their faith was in God, that it was going to be okay. They're telling them the battle's already won. Have you ever had, a friend or a family member that no matter what happened, they always seem to look at the glass half empty? No matter how much you told them, like, this is a great thing, or, you tried to, inspire them or get them on a good note, or you tried to, encourage them, they always looked at the glass half empty. I work with a lot of people like that. And, you could literally hand them $100 and they'll just give you a sigh, like, could have really used 101, but you know how bills are. That's the kind of, environment that I work in. It's the kind of environment I've become accustomed to. People like that around you every single day, and only thing that I can do in myself is be a good representation of Christ. The only thing I can do is encourage them and inspire them to be a better version of themselves every single day, because that is what Jesus called us to do. And that's what Caleb and Joshua are trying to accomplish here. They're trying to encourage these people. They don't want to hear it, but they're trying to encourage them. It's a tough setting when you know what God has for you and you know what God is capable of, but everybody else around you doesn't seem to get the big picture. I've dealt with that frustration many times in my life. And God has spoke to me at a time or another and let me know that if I keep trying to measure up everybody else and how they feel and their expectations and their beliefs to my own, I'm going to constantly be let down, because not everybody's the same. Not everybody believes the same way. Not everybody has the same faith capacity. God encourages me to just be the best representation of him that I can be and to just stay committed to him. And with that and that mentality that I've taken on, I have become so much happier in the last 5-6 years that I've been thinking this way and been believing this way. In Numbers chapter 14, verse 10, it says right here, it blows me away. But all the congregation bade stone them with stones, and the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of the congregation before all the children of Israel. The Israelites are so wrapped up in their own anxieties and fears, they start stoning the only source of encouragement around them. It's crazy to me. These people are trying to be positive and be, a light in this dark time, and you start stoning them. That it happens in our daily life anyway. It happens, it seems crazy right here, but it happens to us on a daily basis. We're constantly ridiculed for our faith. Not, whether it be in the news or whether it be, in person, we're ridiculed day after day. But it didn't stop Caleb and Joshua. It did not stop their faith. It did not waver their faith. It did not shrink their ability to believe in what they knew God had for them. Because of the rebellion fueled by fear and uncertainty, the Israelites had to wander 40 years before they were finally able to reach the promised land. The only two men of that generation that entered in the land were Caleb and Joshua. The only two men of their generation that were in that entire tribe that entered in were Caleb and Joshua. Those whose faith never wavered in the bleakest moments. Those who never went home. Those who decided they refused to go back. They refused to die in the wilderness. Those who never gave up even when it seemed impossible. They served a God of the impossible, and they knew that. When I was growing up, I love this story, and now I finally get a chance to tell it the right way. See, this is my time now. When I was growing up, my dad had a routine, and I know I get it from him. I know I get this structured way of living from him. He's the exact same way. Every Saturday when we lived in Arizona, he had this routine because he fasted every Saturday for years now. And every Saturday he would go get a pizza before he went on his fast and would sit down and watch SportsCenter, ESPN. And that was the last, indulgence he would, give into before he went on his fast. After that, it was Bible time, prayer. It was very structured. And I remember going into him when he was eating his pizza and watching his sports and telling him, "Dad, I got a problem here." He's like, "What's going on?" The day before, my brother and I had a big family outing, and one of my cousins had a big bike, a bicycle, and I didn't know how to ride without training wheels yet. And my brother just jumped on the bike and started riding. Micah just jumped on and started going and didn't look back. Didn't ever try to ride without training wheels, nothing. Just jumped on and went. No problems. I did not work that way. I was super uncoordinated. I had no balance. You guys ever seen The Little Rascals, Alfalfa Switzer? That was me. That was 100% me. No joke. I was awkward, uncoordinated. I did not have any balance. I didn't know what I was doing. But I went to my dad and I was like, you're going to have to help me learn how to ride a bike. I feel stupid now. Because Micah's out in the street and he's riding the neighbor kids' bikes. I can't do it yet. So I could tell he just let out this big sigh like, it was his fast day. He didn't really want to have to deal with it, but he did it anyway. He took me out in the backyard and he's like, all right, jump on. I took my training wheels off and he puts me up on top of this hill. I was like, think we can start down here? Just, you hold on to me and, make sure I'm okay. He's like, nope. He's like, training wheels are off. Get on the bike. You're going down the hill. I was like, okay. So I jump on and I take off and I slam like instantly. Just smack into the rocks in the Arizona desert. I'm spitting out dust and my dad's just laughing. He's like, come on, get up. We're doing it again. I was like, I'm hurting. This isn't cool. This is torture, child abuse, CPS, somebody. So I get back on, I do it again, and I do it again. And I keep falling and falling and falling. And finally, it's getting dark. This was like 2 hours. I just couldn't get it. I couldn't get the concept. My dad's like, he gets out on my level, and he looks at me right in the eyes, and he's like, are you going to go inside and let everybody else know that you didn't learn how to do this after you tried so long and so hard? Or are you going to get on? Are you going to figure it out? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to figure it out. So it took me like 2 more tries, and I finally, I just started riding. And all of a sudden, I felt the wheels moving, and I wasn't falling, and I was going. And I was freaking out. I was like, yeah, like I got it. And I look back, and I'm waving at my dad, and he's waving at me, and he's really waving at me to tell me to stop. I turned, and I looked, and I smashed right into a brick wall. First concussion. And I chipped my tooth, which I still have to this day. But I learned how to ride my bike. The point of the story. The point of the story is that I never gave up. Even when I felt defeated, even when it hurt, even when I wanted to quit, I didn't give up on the task at hand, and my dad never gave up on me. Although it took them time, it took them another 40 years, the Israelites never gave up, and God never gave up on them. And he isn't going to start with any single one of us. No matter what we're going through, no matter what we're dealing with, that overwhelming feeling that you have right now of being stuck, the anxieties of your job, the pressures and the traps that the enemy continues to keep setting for you, it's all temporary. It might feel like you've been there for 40 years, but hold on, because God is bringing you into the promised land. Sometimes it just takes some of us to take on a Joshua and Caleb mentality and say nothing is going to stop us from what God has for us. Don't die in your desert. Grow in it. Grow in it. God took them around for 40 years to teach them some things. He taught them humbleness. He taught them appreciation for the things you have. He taught them how to love one another, how to count on each other. Don't die in your desert. Grow in your desert, because it's all temporary. There's one more verse that I want to share with you guys. It's Psalm chapter 46, 1-3. It says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore will we not fear, although the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though the waters thereof be troubled, though the mountains shake and the swelling thereof. Selah. Love it. I love this verse, and I've shared it so many times with my youth. And I've shared it because the meaning holds so much value. As I continue to carry on duties as the youth pastor of this church, I want you all to know that it's an honor and a privilege for me to do so. I look at every single one of these teens that I preach to every single week like little brothers and sisters. The one thing that God has placed on my heart to constantly let them know, though, is that even though the world around us is changing and it's chaotic and it's downright frightening sometimes, for us, it's when we turn on the news or when we get to work or we're dealing with things in our own adult life that we won't ever put on our kids. We won't ever let them know what we're dealing with. For them, it's when they enter the school doors. For them, it's when they get there and they have to deal with this atmosphere of so many pressures and so many ideas of what they should be. Everybody pulling them in different directions of what's cool and what's right and what's, the popular thing to do. If there's one thing that I want them to know, and I continue to preach to them, it's that when things are chaotic and when things are changing, when things are just downright crazy, the one thing that always remains the same is God. It's God and his grace and his love. The perfect love that casts out fear is a perfect love that continues to be there for us in our darkest moments when we can't seem to love ourselves. I want them to constantly remember that no matter what it is they're dealing with, what it is that they're going through, the same message applies for all of us today. Our God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, always faithful, always on time, and never fails us. He will always be there for us, even in our darkest times when we can't seem to see that light at the end of the tunnel. Because there are a lot of things that we as adults keep inside that we don't share with anybody else. But that one outlet that we have is God. And it's his perfect love and his perfect grace that continues to push me forward every single day, continues to inspire me to get out of bed when I don't feel like it, continues to inspire me to be a perfect representation of how much I can be, even though I fail and I fall short. He wants me to be a representation of him. Stay consistent. Stay encouraged. Stay in your words. Stay in prayer. And he will show up every single time. As I hand the mic back off over to Pastor David, I just want to let you all know the same thing that I constantly tell my teens, my youth, that no matter what, God is always going to be there. He's always there. He never fails. He never doesn't show up. Even with the Israelites, when they felt like they didn't have a place to go and they wanted to go back to their vomit, their place where God just delivered them from. He encouraged them, he stood them up straight, and he got them to their end goal. It might have taken a little bit longer, and it might take a little bit longer for some of us. But stay encouraged and stay in your word, and he will come through for us every single time.
I appreciate that so much. This is the first time that he's ever spoken in the church like this. It's the first time he's ever preached. And it's just I just sat there and I could see him, when he was little and all the things, that he's gone through over the years. And, I just see God working. And I know what God is doing, with my sons, and he's not done yet. And I know that it's the same God that will do the same thing for you and for your family. And I see God working, and I see God moving, and I know that God's got, great things for each and every one of us. And when I look at my son, I see it working. When I look at you, I see it working. I look at the church, I see it working. When you get into the Word of God and you just begin to understand, the things of God and what God has for us. And I see it working in your lives. I see it, working when it's miserable outside and we still get up and come to church. I see it when we come in and we have a different spirit. We have an expectation. I see it working. And when you see it begin to work like that. I've talked to, there was somebody that came up to me the other night, and one of the young men from Bridgeway, and they began to ask me, said, Pastor, when is it how do I recognize when it's harvest time? I said, well, things will start to begin to change. All the things around you will start to get better. I said, you'll start to come into those things that God has for you. And there was another young man standing right next to him. He said, I see it happening in my life. I know what Pastor's talking about. He said, I see it happening in my life. He said, I see the things beginning to change in my life and getting better. I see what God is doing. And that's what God is wanting from each and every one of us. He wants, to get into our life and begin to make that change, even as I'm sitting there watching Christian. And as I was listening to him, I started feeling better. And I saw, what God can do with us, each and every one of us. And I see, the difference as we begin to grow in God. I see the church not only beginning to grow in numbers, I see the church beginning to grow spiritually. I know that this fasting has a lot to do with it. And I know it's something that the devil hates. But we're going to continue doing it. We're going to continue in there and remaining faithful. Isn't that right? I believe, church, we were talking about this last week. We were talking about it last week, about being consistent in God, and getting in there and staying at it. Christian was talking about when he, was working on something as simple as trying to ride the bike. And I saw the first time that he would get on it, he wouldn't get very far. The wheels wouldn't even turn. He just fell over. He didn't understand that he had to keep moving to keep it from falling over. And that's what we have to do. We have to keep moving in that forward direction or we'll fall. I got to stay in my word. I got to stay in prayer. I got to keep moving in that forward spiritual direction or we're going to fall. It doesn't matter who we are. You got to get in that word and you got to stay in it. We got to remain consistent. We got to stay at it. Even when you don't feel like staying at it. On those days that you don't feel like, getting up and staying at it, you do it anyways. Even when I was laying there in the bed yesterday, I'm laying there and the only thing I'm thinking about is God. Because that's the only thing that is going to get me out of that mess I was in. I got my mind on him. I wasn't thinking about food. I wouldn't even let anybody cook in the house. I was just laying there thinking about the things of God and how God is able to get us through every one of these things. And we got to stay at it. We got to keep moving. And that's what we're doing right here at Grace Tabernacle. We're staying at it. We're keeping moving. And when I see things like this, I see it working, church. I see it working for your children. I see it working for your homes. I see it working in your lives. I see a change. I see people growing in God. And this is what God, we want to keep it moving. Because if it don't, church, we're going to fall. I want to stay in my word. I want to stay in prayer. This is something, that's that daily relationship with God. And I know, church, as we continue to go forward in God, he's got great things for us. How many believe it this morning? I'm looking forward to it. I know that, that God just used Christian to speak a word to us, to encourage us. Why don't you stand to your feet with me real quick? We're going to pray.